welcome to Concussion Doc Podcast, episode 118. And first of all, I'm Nick Mercer of Concussion Doc, www.concussiondoc.com. I'm with Michelle Ploughman now, Dr. Michelle Ploughman, to you and to me. But first, I'll just remind everybody to please rate, subscribe, review to this podcast, and to follow me on social media at Concussion Doc. And that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and my website, which is concussiondoc.com. Patreon.com/concussion talk. And I'm on Acast podcast. And I guess, again, I'm probably missing something again, but I'm just probably get on the podcast. So thank you for listening, and here's where my sponsor, HeadCheck Health.
Concussion Talk Podcast is presented by HeadCheck Health. HeadCheck Health bridges the gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Track Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck Health to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more.
Okay, Michelle, Doctor, I'm sorry, I should ask you before we started. Do you like to be called Dr. Michelle Ploughman, or like Michelle, because I kind of know you, but...
Yeah, I'm really comfortable with Michelle.
Michelle, okay, well, Michelle, Dr. Michelle Ploughman is the Canada Research Chair in Rehabilitation, Neuroplasticity and Brain Canada Research Chair in Rehabilitation, Neuroplasticity and Brain Recovery. And she's the Associate Professor of
Medicine.
Yeah,
at Memorial University.
But I'll actually get her to better describe herself than I'm doing. And we're going to talk about her new new recovery and performance laboratory in St. John's. But Michelle, thank you so much for being on this podcast. And I can believe it's been this long since I've known you and had you on the podcast. This is a long time, but can you just please just reintroduce yourself, because I probably didn't do a great job.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me today. Really glad to talk to you. So we opened up the Recovery and Performance Lab in 2015 and gradually acquired cutting edge functional neuroimaging equiment. Our lab is the most easterly neuroscience lab, I think, in North America, being in St. John's, Newfoundland.
It's gotta be.
And so I always brag that you can't get any further east than our neuroscience
the number one Eastern research lab in North America.
Yeah, that's right. So we're really interested in looking at how the brain modifies itself after injury. And the two diseases we focus on, and we were interested in lots of different kinds of disorders of the brain, but we focus on multiple sclerosis, which is an autoimmune disorder that affects the brain and the spinal cord. And also we're interested in stroke recovery. And those are our two, I would say, models that we work on and try to understand the optimal ways to get the brain to repair and reorganize so that people get maximum recovery. My special interest is really in aerobic exercise. I have two sort of areas: one, aerobic exercise and how aerobic exercise can foster plasticity. And the second area I'm really interested in is called neuromodulation. So using a device or a technique to stimulate the brain from the outside. So non-invasive ways to prime the brain, let's say.
Perfect. Okay. So as you used to research at Memorial University, now you're at the Miller Center, which is the rehabilitation hospital in St. John's, where I spent a lot of time, and I know it well. And so you're what was your research at Memorial University and your teaching, and then also you just along with that, just define what our stroke and MS, like, just
right,
not totally general sense, but scientific kind of ish.
Sure. So, before I entered the academic world and research world, I spent 15 years as a neurological physiotherapist. And that's my love, really, is hands-on clinical physiotherapy. And in that job, I worked mainly at the Miller Center, but lots of other different hospitals within Newfoundland, focusing on ways that physiotherapy can really drive plasticity, reorganization, and recovery. And that was in people with spinal cord injury, people who had traumatic brain injury, stroke, MS, really interested in anything that was a disorder of the central nervous system. And it was in the time around, I would say, the mid-1990s, I became really interested in neuroplasticity and the concepts of neuroplasticity, what's really happening inside the brain.
Yeah, I remember actually Jen Shares, my physiotherapist, who always spoke with you and how great you are before I knew you. And they did neuroplasticity to me in 2003, and that's before it really became even a bigger thing. And you're talking about in mid-90s. So sorry.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so I was reading, there wasn't really much in humans, right? You had to go back to the animal research to try to understand what is happening. So I started reading some work by a guy named Randy Nudo. So if you ever get a chance to read his work, and what he did was he used the macaque monkey model, where he created an injury to the animal's brain, and then he tried different intensities of rehabilitation for the upper limb. So he had constrained the animal so that they couldn't use their good arm. He created these wells that the animals would reach into. And the cool thing he was able to do was actually map the motor cortex and show you exactly how the brain was being modified. And what he found was that there were combinations. So by combining interventions, say both the constraint and the high degree, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reaching practices, that was the way we saw repair, reorganization, and recovery. Those are the 3 R's for us.
Yeah.
And so it was from there I started to say, okay, so how do I apply this to someone with stroke? And clearly putting things together, combining therapies, makes sense. It seems like the brain wants this kind of higher intensity intervention. So that's where I started with animal models, and I got involved in pairing aerobic exercise to cognitive training, pairing aerobic exercise with reach training in an animal model. Of course, in rats, you can take the brain out. We can slice the brain at 40 microns. You can stain for neurons and branching. And that's what you're able to do, is really determine what is the optimal dosage, why recovery happens. So we talked a lot, and I studied neurotrophins. One of the neurotrophins I studied was called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And we showed that that was actually pretty critical, and that when you increase BDNF inside the brain, that seems to be the stimulus or the fertilizer for the brain to help it help axonal branching and synaptic plasticity. So that's where I started, and I'm sort of back now doing human research again, and very practical, trying to answer questions important for clinicians.
Wow. So how does that apply to your used to do stroke research and MS? So can you just define stroke and MS? Define and talk about them. Describe them. What they're.
There's sort of two, although they're both create injuries to the central nervous system, they both have different ways that happens. So in stroke, you have a sudden onset, a vascular disruption of a major vessel within the brain. And that can be through an ischemic event like a blockage or a bleed. In either case, you get this immediate damage of tissues, and we know how important oxygen and blood supply is to these neurons. So there's some neurons that will die right away and they can't be restored. But now we have new treatments that can quickly basically unplug the blockages, but you still will have some damage. And so what has to happen is areas that are not damaged have to learn over time to take over for that damaged area. So I'm really interested in that, because I think it's an excellent way to look at brain plasticity. The challenge with working in stroke is that it tends to be older people. So you tend to be over 60 years of age. The brain has a little bit less capacity to be flexible. So it's interesting to try to drive plasticity in this group. In MS, it's completely different. We're talking about now younger people. So it's diagnosed between the age of 16 and 40. And I became really interested in MS because many of my classmates in physiotherapy school, a couple developed MS. Some of my work colleagues had MS. They tended to be just like me in my 20s at that time. And I sort of thought, I really need to do more. There doesn't seem to be much out there to help people with MS help repair their brain. So MS is an autoimmune disorder for reasons we don't understand. Your maybe genetic makeup, low levels of vitamin D, so where you live seems to be important. And then there seems to be a viral trigger and your body starts attacking the myelin inside your central nervous system. And this causes these little tiny lesions, little spots all over the brain. And
the myelin is like the protective coating of the nerves, right? So
it is so essential for the health of the nerve. And if you demyelinate a nerve, it will die. And if it's damaged myelin, it can't conduct as quickly. So you can't think, you can't process, you have fatigue. So the two are entirely different. Stroke is in older people. MS tends to be in younger people. Stroke tends to be larger, more discrete lesions, whereas MS, there tends to be little lesions all throughout the brain. So, but MS is cool because there are new drugs now, new biologics that help stabilize the disease. So I think there's a lot more opportunities for repair now.
Mm-hmm. And so I should want to ask you with the, you said the cardiovascular, I guess, I don't know if you found anything before the net or if you can even say what you found, but how does the cardiovascular aspect of it, or is that the same as like the same? Well, I guess no, I guess not. So that this cardiovascular aspect of your research, what's that about?
Mm-hmm. So I think people have an idea that your brain is completely separate from your arteries, your veins, your heart. In fact, your heart and your brain are connected by huge vessels. And so I always say there's an interaction, or there's a heart-brain-mind connection.
Yeah.
And when you exercise, many things happen. So I'll speak about aerobic exercise, but you could also apply this to resistance exercise. When your muscles contract, they release myokines. BDNF is actually one of them. There's others. These are pro-growth beneficial brain proteins.
So is that why you say a good cardiovascular, like your diaphragm or your lungs, like the BDNF from that, the muscles from that?
Well, when we say, those are really good points. When I say cardiorespiratory fitness, what I mean is the heart's ability to supply blood and necessary oxygen to skeletal muscle.
Yeah.
So so that's an idea. Well, it not just supplying to skeletal muscle, but to every organ in your body, including your brain, right? Mm-hmm. So when you exercise, you get this increased blood supply to the brain. You get these upregulation of these beneficial neurotrophins, which help heal the brain. You also change, and we're interested in levels of excitability. So as you know, there's a balance of neurotransmitters, there's excitation and inhibition, it's normal. And this balance of excitability seems to be really important for relearning and for alertness and for all the functions we think about that the brain is responsible for. So what exercise does is what we've shown is that when you're fitter, you have greater levels of excitability and less inhibition. So it shifts the balance to a pro-learning state. So the brain is more flexible and more ready to learn.
Okay, and so it just accepts, it just changes to new pathways. That's how neuroplasticity works.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a balance of neurotransmitters, really. So you really want a balance toward, if you have too much inhibition in the brain, so GABA is one of the inhibitory
Yeah.
transmitters. If you have too much of that, then you have less capacity in general for neuroplasticity. So
Right.
excitatory activity is good. Of course, excess excitatory activity could be
Yeah.
related to seizure or something like that. But
So
So
how does this, sorry,
yeah.
how does fatigue go into this whole like cardiovascular excitability, and like when does what effect does, say, just being not fatigue from a brain injury, but fatigue from
Yeah.
running for too long, or for just running out too long?
Yeah, we're really interested in fatigue because people with MS, and also I know people with concussion, people who have stroke, people who have other autoimmune disorders experience a tremendous amount of fatigue.
Yeah.
And we're trying to disentangle what it is exactly. Like, what is it exactly? Is this motor fatigue? Is this from your body? Is this cognitive fatigue or thinking fatigue?
It seems to be
And
almost.
yeah, it's complex. It's more complex than you think.
Yes.
And we're
And
also studying state fatigue, like your feeling of fatigue every day versus your fatigability. Like maybe when you might have not much fatigue when you start in the day, but as you engage in something that's really mentally challenging or physically challenging, you fatigue more than you used to. And then that's fatigability. So yeah, we have techniques that we can scan the brain as you're doing mentally challenging tasks. So we use a technique called functional near infrared spectroscopy, or FNIRS. Yeah, big word. But what it does is essentially uses lights. You wear a cap on your head. It looks like an EEG cap. It's a black cap with little optodes, and these optodes shine light on the surface of the brain. And we can look at the scatter of light and understand how much oxygen is in that area of the brain. So we've been finding that people who experience mental fatigue, people with MS who experience mental fatigue, don't seem to be recruiting the same areas of their brain as healthy control subjects who don't have fatigue. So there's something about maybe your brain is not efficient and it's not recruiting the areas it should be. And so then you experience this mental fatigue. But we'd love to know more about it. I think that aerobic exercise could potentially be a treatment for mental fatigue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because I know, I mean, my brain injury, my severe brain injury was in 03, but I've noticed that now it's all my swimming is just I aerobic is definitely helping with my swimming ability and my swimming endurance. And I found that, but I still find that I'm obviously way below where I was, but that's 19 years ago now. And let's see. Also, I was gonna play. I play chess now, and
Okay.
well, not now. I played a bit. I knew I played when I was like 10 or whatever, but stopped playing for a long time. But I started.
Do
to
you
pick up again.
find that, like, if for you have such a commitment to your fitness,
Yeah.
and do you think there's a link in your training, say when you're training hard and you're, say, in the pond and you're swimming in the summertime, does that have an impact on mental or physical fatigue from your perspective?
I would, from my perspective, I would say definitely yes, but I can't give you concrete examples of why it is. But I just know that I do. I feel better when I go for, like, in the summer. If I can't get the lake in the morning, then I'll swim at the afternoon, or like, even it's a nice day out now, but like even like not this time of year, like May, when it's nice out and I go for a swim. I'm exhausted after I finish swimming, but then seem to recover pretty quickly, and then I walk home. I walk back from the pool, and it's just a great walk. I feel, I don't know if that's being outside, but it's also the activity is just cooling down, kind of. I find that good, and I also find that when I get back, and I am tired when I get home, but And if I play chess, then I find or play something, do something, read or something, I'm more aware, more not necessarily better at my stuff, but I'm just more cognizant of everything that's going on, but more aware of everything. And it's just I mean, also depends on what I eat that day, but I mean still, but yeah, but it's I do find that physical activity and light mental activity, well, not light and say light, but with mental activity, it does make me feel better. It's internal, which it's kind of my natural state, but also just better, just more days, and yeah. So I think that's a definite thing.
I think there's something to it. I mean, it's more than just endorphins. I mean, obviously you're releasing these feel-good hormones, endorphins, which help you feel better. But there's work by Dr. Lara Boyd at UBC and Dr. Mark Roig at McGill, and they both showed that when you have a task that you have to learn, like a really complex task, when you have a bout of aerobic exercise and before that, so Dr. Boyd uses high intensity interval training. When you pair that high intensity interval training with the task you want to learn, you learn it much better. And she does this in healthy controls and probably in stroke as well. And I mean, it's there's something to it.
And definitely, because it seems similar to just saying, in summer there's regular when you're for the control, as you would say, a controlled person. So a person who's just not injured and doesn't have anything being able to say any issue that would inhibit them. It seems to be that when you do insert, like say, hard work, like a high intensity training or something like that, like you do get. I mean, like when I was playing water polo more, when I was not more when I was playing at all, just you learn more when you're exhausted, when it's really hard, and then you fast it a lot quicker than if you would when you were not just regular walking, so going for a regular swim. But if you're a regular swim, like if you're not giving yourself any sort of challenge.
I mean, I think that there's not that many treatments out there that hit so many beneficial targets as aerobic exercise. Because you think about it, in myself and Dr. Liam Kelly, he's an exercise physiologist, we worked together on this paper where we consolidated all the literature on aerobic exercise effects on the brain after stroke. And I mean, there was a huge number of studies, I think 150 or more. And what we did is tried to figure out, well, what is it that it does? And what we found is in animal models definitely promotes repair. So decreasing inflammation, increasing neuronal network change. It increases level of, like I was saying, BDNF, IGF-1, all these neurotrophins, increases cognition, and also has metabolic benefits. So meaning that reduces diabetes, increases, arterial health. So what other treatments? You can't take a pill or any other intervention that's going to be as beneficial as that across so many different areas.
It's exactly. I couldn't agree more. Also, I just told like many people as you listen to me that I've started meditating, and I find that been just incredible too. And but I mean, also I do that with as well as I just never stopped doing swimming and yoga and stuff like that. So being active. So I can't say I don't have a good scientific control for how that's changed, but I mean, I find the same thing. Maybe it's just sitting, and the muscles need to stay sitting for that long enough to concentrate or not concentrate, as it case may be. But just be aware and just that energy taking. But that's right. There's a whole area of research. But also the neuromodulation. So how is that different than your aerobic exercise or your any physical activity that you've previously studied?
Right. So I'm interested in neuromodulation from, if you think about what aerobic exercise does to the brain, makes the brain more amenable to change, which is
Yeah.
what you want. So maybe we can think about, there's some other way to stimulate the brain. So there's some devices now called transcranial direct current stimulation, TCDS, repetitive transcranial nerve stimulation, or transcranial magnetic stimulation, RTMS. We're working on a study right now where we're studying, believe it or not, translingual stimulation. So the other devices stimulate the brain directly with a magnetic pulse or a current. But we're using translingual stimulation, it's a device made by a company called Helios, and we're testing in a randomized controlled trial to see whether when you combine that with balance and gait training in people with MS, does it actually make a difference?
Is that
So we've
your tongue or
your tongue? That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So you place this, because you think about, the cranial nerves that come out from the brain stem are really the closest nerves to the brain, and they're embedded inside the brainstem, which is responsible for level of alertness, integration of movement. So the trigeminal nerve, facial nerve, they're all around the tongue. So the idea is stimulate the tongue to stimulate the brainstem. And there's some studies done with using fMRI to say that, in fact, that happens, that this device stimulates the brainstem. So we're investigating that in a trial. I think the human brain has a limited capacity for plasticity and a critical window where after a lesion or damage, it seems like most recovery is going to happen between like 3 to 6 months. So in order to get recovery outside of that window, continued recovery, I think you need high volumes of practice, or maybe help from some kind of neuromodulation. We're also getting ready to look at, I think, we're going to see neuroplasticity promoting drugs. So you combine a drug that's known to facilitate activity within the brain, neuronal modification, you combine that with rehabilitation. So I think it's exciting. The field of neuroplasticity is just exciting. I don't think that neuromodulation on its own does that much. I think you need to combine it with whatever you want to learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Josh, your title, the title for this, which I said before, but this Canada Research Chair in Rehabilitation, Neuroplasticity and Brain Recovery, it's kind of like this. But I would basically I don't know if the chair part, but kind of like the subtitle of this podcast is like Rehabilitation and Brain Recovery.
Yeah.
And neuroplasticity, if I imagine.
Right. That's right.
It's not a scientific podcast per se, but it does do like to interview people like you who are research the stuff. But you're in a great spot to research the stuff at the Medical Center. And
and I was so lucky. At the time when I started at Memorial, we had a lot of discussion of where the lab should be, and there was feelings that I should be in the main campus in the medical school. And I said, no, I need to be near the patients. I need to be near the people that I work with. And that has proven to be a great decision. Yeah. So the Canada Research Chair, just to mention, that is a program in the federal government that strategically places scientists in areas of high need and importance. So I'm really grateful to have that position, and I have it until 2024. So it's a limited position, up to 10 years. And so it gives me a unique focus, and I have not much teaching load, and I can focus my energies completely on science and research.
And so, in speaking of research, I can't probably don't want to say when they work on now, but maybe you do. But you work on it. You have, like I said, you have lots of patients and bullying other people who are participated, who we talked about before, and so that's just great. And but what is your not to say focus, because I know it's a whole bunch of stuff on this neuromodulation piece, but is there anything any paper or work that you're doing now, or that any of the people who are involved with your research here, your title of that the whole program. And
Yeah.
anything that's exciting to come up.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll tell one cool place to find research in this field is Google Scholar. If you're not familiar, it's like Google for academics, and we use it all the time as a great way to find your topics. You can put in a person's name and their work will come up, and you can sort it by year. Makes it easy. So Google Scholar. But right now we're just finishing up the Neuromistrals trial, which is a trial using the device PONS, the translingual neurostimulation. We'll be finished that in August, and our results will be, I don't know the results because I'm blinded to what group. There's two groups, a sham device and a real device. So I have no idea what the results are until everybody's unblinded. We're just finishing off some work in mental fatigue and understanding that when you're loading up cognitive tasks, like loading and asking people to multitask, what's happening inside the brain so that we can understand how to treat it and how to develop treatments for it. We're also studying now the effect of cardiorespiratory fitness on stroke recovery and neuroplasticity. So we're asking every participant, every person who's had a stroke who enters our rehabilitation center to have their brain mapped over time using our techniques. And we measure their fitness, and we ask about their physical activity before and after the stroke. And we're trying to understand whether being fit confers any benefit to plasticity within the brain.
Okay, and you define fitness relatively just as in just more better cardiovascular, better heart rate control, better breathing control and stuff like that.
So we have a full metabolic suite. It's called a metabolic cart. So you wear a mask and we push you to your maximum on our body weight support treadmill or a recumbent stepper, and we measure the degree, basically how much oxygen you breathe in and carbon dioxide you breathe out tells us your ability to use oxygen in the air. So we know we have a valid gold standard measurement of your cardiorespiratory fitness.
That itself is very interesting. It's also very interesting that my good friend Lauren Zayek's DPT and does Phoenix Concussion Recovery podcast, which I hadn't done in a while, but she's a good friend on this podcast. And she and DPT Jenna Tucker all just released, and others, a paper in Cambridge University Press, not Cambridge, and about dysautonomia and Buffalo concussion treadmill test. And the effects of that. So that's obviously you can just follow her online and I'll send you what I see of her work, and they'll be on this podcast in June probably to help with that. So that'd be great. But where can people? That's just I shouldn't plug their New York podcast, but I just did. But where can people find out more about your work and this excellent laboratory going into the Miller Center?
Sure. I'd say I'm most active on Twitter. So I'm at Mish Ploughman, MICHPLOUGHMAN, at Mish Ploughman. And we also have a website, www.drmichelleploughman, that's drmichelleploughman.com. And we also, if you search me in the Faculty of Medicine, you'll see we have a sheet, just a web page there in the Faculty of Medicine, and we try to update that as quickly as we can. We also have Facebook, Recovery and Performance Lab, and on Facebook.
And if you want to search your name, Dr. Michelle Ploughman, or just Michelle Ploughman on Google Scholar, for example.
That's exactly what you would do. In fact, some techniques on Google Scholar which help is put the word "and" in uppercase letters in between your words, And what that'll do is only look for that string where the two words are together. Say, for example, if you wanted to say Michelle Ploughman, you would get all the Michelles and all the Ploughmans. But if you said Michelle and Ploughman, you would get just Michelle Ploughman. Same way with searching for everything, like multiple sclerosis is a good example. Put and in between to make sure you only get the multiple sclerosis. Yeah.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, so I mean, this is like this old school library searching. Remember this in like, I don't want to say old school, but like for 20 years old, right? That's the type of, I know like the Google had the librarians were doing their like their research protocols, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's right. The days of all those libraries filled and filled with papers, just we don't, it's all,
ICBN.
yeah, I would say between
Yes.
PubMed is probably where the other one I use a
Yeah.
lot, PubMed and Google Scholar.
There you go.
In fact, in PubMed, I set up, if you can set up a free search. So you can put in a search, and if you want to be updated on science in a particular area, you can have it automatically sending it to your email, updates in the field.
Well, there you go. So it's just, I mean, there's so much stuff out there, especially Michelle and Ploughman and Michelle Ploughman and all the stuff that all the work that the recovery and the performance lab are doing in my hometown, our hometown.
Our hometown.
Are you from it? Are you from Barration? But
I'm from a town called Deer Lake, which is on the west coast of Newfoundland, and not that many people, maybe 6,000 people. And
the best weather.
Yeah, and I packed up when I was really young and moved off to Dalhousie University to do my physiotherapy.
See, really young. She was like, that'd be 22 probably.
I think I was 18.
Oh yeah. By the way, and they're really young. So everyone listening were 19 years old and thinking, oh, I'm old. But like, you're not. You're like barely alive. Barely born. But thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah, really nice talking to you. Nice seeing you again.
Thank you so much. Music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.